Dr. Ginsberg, what were the initial differences between the United States and Europe's cellular regulation market structures?
I think that some of the similarities might have been more important than the differences. In both the United States and Europe, the regulators decided on a duopoly market structure, that there would be two licensees. And this was a tremendous change from communications as it had been practiced on either side of the Atlantic. However, the way that was implemented was very different. In Europe, the second licensee was a national, the second license was a national license. One license was set aside for the government monopoly telephone company. The other was awarded through a beauty contest and application process, but it was a national license. In the United States, because of the differing regulatory telecommunications structure, you had a large number of local telephone companies. And the Federal Communications Commission divided the United States ultimately into about 700 different market areas. And two licenses were created in each market, one of which went to the local telephone company. So whereas in Europe, in a country, you would have two licensees, in the United States, over time, you had something like 14 or 1,500. And the consequence of that was it was much easier to establish nationwide, seamless service in a country in Europe, and then have to deal with roaming among a relatively small set of other operators. Whereas in the United States, it was very difficult to get to that point where you could really have seamless roaming because you had hundreds of operators that, in theory, you'd have to have some agreement with in order to achieve that.
What are the challenges associated with regulating a fledgling industry such as cellular communications once was?
I think the fundamental difficulty, and it was on the part of the regulators as well as the companies, is that you had no experience. I mean, there were no companies like yours. It was a brand new industry. So it was an evolving form of regulation. I mean, you had the basic structure, but the regulators had to be ready and able to deal with problems that arose. And there could be legitimate issues, things not working out as foreseen. There could be technical issues. But I think overall, on both sides of the Atlantic, things developed pretty well. I mean, to the extent that there were technical difficulties, they were resolved. To the extent that there were business difficulties, I think that regulation has adapted to that. And one of the things that we've seen, which I think reflects on perhaps not the degree of competition that the regulators had initially hoped for, was the introduction of more competitors, the allocation of greater spectrum so that the regulators could give out more licenses and thereby have more than two companies competing in each market.
How has regulation created incentives to game the system among both incumbents and new entrants to the market?
I think fundamentally, you're going to try to figure out ways of operating your business that adhere to what you're told to do, but in a way that causes you the least pain. Pain might be measured in difficulties in adhering to the regulations. It may mean minimizing the cost of complying with that regulation. It may be trying to interpret the regulation in a way that is advantageous to you. It may be a very practical thing. In the United States, we might have had a neighboring system that was operated by someone else. We wanted to buy that license so we could incorporate it into our system. Early on, that was not allowed. So we had to figure out some way of, you might call it, gaming the system to allow us to effectively operate that market while still maintaining the fiction, in some instances, that the licensee really had control over that license. I would argue that part of gaming the system was so that we could provide better service to the customer and was overcoming a mistake that the FCC made.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ginsberg.
Thank you.